Hello friends, today we're going to talk about this speaker that I got at a thrift store. It says 99 cents here. I think I got it on their half price green tag sale, so it's for 50 cents. I only got one of these. Often you want them in pairs. I got plenty of speakers and several that are better than this, but this is what intrigued me about this one. It's relatively small, let's say about 10 inches tall. But I can see even through the grill cloth, you can see it there on the video, that this is a three-way speaker. Now there's lots of small speakers, and there's lots of three-way speakers, but I've never seen a three-way speaker that's this small. Here's the venting port that this type of speaker always has. Of course, the customary jacks on the back. And just in case the thing is toasted, before I hook it up to my stereo, I'm going to measure the ohms through the speaker, which should be something less than 8 if it's an 8 ohm speaker. Stuck in real good. Okay, well, a little bit over 8, that's fine. Anyway, with 9.7 ohms that you're seeing there, I'm safe to plug this into my stereo. It's not a great stereo anyway, but, you know, we're trying to apply science to the problem. So I'm going to hook that up real quick. Turn on, I'm going to face it this way so that you can see it make sound. Oh, it works. Okay. I hear that YouTube has some kind of draconian copyright policy, so I'm hoping that whatever random thing happened to be on the radio is not going to concern them too much. Anyway, I didn't evaluate it for sound, but I did see that it basically worked. And here's our three-way speaker that we have. This is supposedly the bass, mid-range, and the treble. These look like inexpensive elements, and sometimes things like this, they try to sort of dress them up to make them look fancier than they are. So this is sort of impressive looking in the way with nicer three-way speakers like this typically come with a cover like this that pops off. And here you can see where it's dented. This is particle board with some sort of stick-on stuff. Particle board actually it's a cheap material, but it's actually good for speaker enclosures because it's very thick and dense for this type of speaker. This one, I can tell, actually you can look at it, it's about maybe a 1/4 inch thick there. You know, when I've seen particle board used, it's usually maybe a 1/2 inch thick or so. So this is possibly a cheap speaker that's trying to act more important than it is. But there isn't any obvious way into it here without destroying it. One thing I've seen, this is kind of a disassembly tip. Whenever you take something apart and you can't see any form of screws, look for labels or even rubber feet like this, where there may be a screw hiding underneath that. Or it could be this thing was somehow fitted together or glued together. So one thing we can see to get into this, I'm going to try to get into it without destroying it, is let's unscrew the base element. Okay. As I suspected, this is actually a plastic ring with some sort of silver paint on it. Thought we might have screws hidden inside there. That's kind of a pinching affair for the... Let's see if I can pry this out. Okay. So that's coming out. Now what we're looking for here is a... I guess I'll zoom in a little bit. What we're looking for here is a crossover network, and that'll be kind of the a sign of whether this thing is all about looks versus having some real functionality. So a crossover network separates the frequency band of sound coming in into the bass, the mid-range, and the high frequency, or this is high frequency elements called a tweeter. So this might either be three speakers that are just sort of wired together, and that way we know we're dealing with a fraud, or if it has some sort of at least minimal crossover network, which is kind of usually some capacitors involved. Oh, now this is interesting. That's actually a fairly big element. It says 8 ohms and 25 watts. You probably can't read that, but this is a big magnet, and that makes sense for a 25 watt speaker. Aha! Well, maybe I ha-ha'd too soon. Okay, now we're going to unscrew the other two and see what's going on with them. Interesting. This is purely a dummy. I didn't think about that. This one moves a little bit, so it's probably a real speaker. So to go back to this one for a second, sometimes speakers designed use something called a passive radiator, which is a thing that doesn't have a driver on it, but contributes to the sound by vibrating as part of the overall design. This one is not like that. This is purely rigid plastic, so this is just essentially cosmetic. Now in here, I can't really show you the inside, but actually it's apparent from the wiring here, now that I think about it. We've got wires going from the back maybe to this speaker, and then another pair of wires going directly to this speaker. So this one, whatever it is kind of wired on directly with a crossover. Or, pardon me, without a crossover. So we'll take this off. Again, plastic ring with silver paint on it. The wire's kind of stretched out. Ah, now that's interesting. Look at this. This one says 25 watts, and it's got a big magnet relative to its cone size, and it has this little capacitor on here. So I guess you could say this is a crossover, but it's kind of like the cheapest, simplest, flimsiest type of crossover, which is just this one capacitor. In fact, it looks like an electrolytic capacitor, which would surprise me, but maybe it's not. So kind of our conclusion here as far as construction and what we're working with is a 25 watt speaker that, you know, can produce probably a high volume of sound, but has some phony cosmetic aspects to make it look fancier than it is. And if I paid 99 cents for this, or even better, I think 50 cents, you know, I got way more than my money's worth. But whoever it is that bought this thing new probably got cheated, because there's a lot of flim-flammery going on here as far as what this thing looks like versus what it really is. So we'll put that all back together and maybe do a little sound test maybe in the next episode, if I can come up with some copyright-free music that YouTube won't shoot me for using. That's all for now. Thanks, and bye-bye.